We're going to talk today some about formatting and citations. We'll also talk about the reading on Kung Fu Revolution, and if we have time, we'll work a little bit with a student paper that uses the appeals that we talked about in the early sections of the course. Citations and formatting. These are things that you can use for this class. You can use it for other classes. If a teacher doesn't specify which format to use, these might be useful slides to consult to help you present and organize your paper. First section is just on the paper formatting itself. What should a paper that you hand in look like? Or what are some of the elements that you can use to make it look presentable? The style that we're going to focus on today, by the way, is MLA style. Excuse me. There are other styles. Probably the other most widely used one is APA, American Psychological Association. This is the Modern Language Association's version. So that's the one I'm presenting on. So there are a few things to keep in mind here. One, there's a heading, there's a title, and then there's our first paragraph. So for the heading, you should start off with your name. Under that, have the instructor's name. Under that, have the class identification information. And under that, have the date. Pretty straightforward, useful things for both you and your professor. Under the heading, have the title of the essay. Don't skip the opportunity to have a lively and interesting title that can help your reader understand the rest of your paper and help get them oriented. One thing to note at this point, all of this is double-spaced text. So there's double space here, double space here, double space here. That continues with the title and into the first line of the paper. So the spacing is all equal here. However you want to do that, if you want to go through the trouble of hitting return twice, I don't really recommend that. I recommend writing a paper that is half the length of what the double space should be and then formatting the entire thing, or you can format it from early on. The other thing to take note of here is that there's an inch margin on every side. So don't try to make your paper longer by making it 1.5 inches on one side or skipping a bunch of space between the title and the body or things like that. Similarly, we should have just regular spacing in between paragraphs. Don't have an extra large block of space in between each paragraph. Welcome, Najib. This is the works cited page. So in a minute, we're going to talk about how to do in-text citations and what is involved with that. But right now, we're just looking at the works cited page. And again, we'll look at some of the different elements for this here. So let's look at our first entry. By the way, we should also have up here last name and page as a header, 1/2 inch down. We're still doing our regular spacing. This is the same distance, I think, as this is. The formatting of each entry is a little bit different from your regular paragraph. Your regular paragraph, and this includes the first one, is a regular tab. That's about 5 spaces, but if you just hit the tab button on your keyboard, it will indent the amount that you need for your paragraph. It makes it more legible, it makes it more consistent from paper to paper. The works cited page then. The formatting for each entry is a little bit different. Instead of indenting on the first line and then having it a full return after that, we do the reverse here. We have the full line is our first line, and then after that we indent every line. Question, Vardan.
No question, it's a suggestion actually. There's a website called easybib.com that converts all of your, like suppose if you are reading something and you find a credible source, you put that source into the website and it converts your work cited specifically to any format.
There are websites that do that. I would be careful with using them though, because not all of them do it accurately or to style. So it may be true that some of them give these kinds of outputs, but you need to double check because you're responsible for having it formatted this way rather than the website software. So if you come back to your professor and say, well, that's the way the WebBib or whoever else did it, that's not necessarily going to get your points back. Some things that we should be able to identify in each entry. First one, any guesses about what this is?
David Barton. Last name?
That's the last name of the author, right? And then first name of the author. Not too many surprises so far. So last name, comma, first name, period. And then we have this with quotation marks. Any guesses about what that is? Of?
The work.
I heard some other answers too. Probably chapter. We use quotation marks for chapters, articles, in a collection, poems, but we use underlining or italics for the name of the book itself. So this is the chapter, this is the book that it appears in. Some of the examples we'll see later on have not underlining, but they have italics. I treat them as more or less equivalent. I probably prefer underlining, but what I prefer least is that you go back and forth between italics. Think about the underlining as another way of doing italics, but decide which way that you're going to do it and be consistent. It just looks better. Third ed, that's our third edition. So the book has had 2 previous editions, and the one that is being quoted here is the third one. Who are these people?
Sometimes books are written by co-authors.
Co-authors? Authors? These are editors. Yeah? These are the people that compile the work and maybe write an introduction to it. So we have our author over here. This is kind of emphasizing for us that publishing a book is a collective enterprise. So we have our author over here and we have our editors here. New York, that's where it's published. St. Martin's is the press. And then 408 to 21? The page numbers of the article in the book. Good. Okay. One more time. Let's take a look at the second example here and see if we can follow this one. So this one, same thing. Author, chapter, book, editor. Still the editor of the publisher. Publisher and year published. Good. Look at the next one. This is a little bit different. We still have the author. We still have the title, but we have these little numbers down here. What does that suggest to us? That means that this is a journal, an academic journal. So we still have the underlining instead of having the book, but this time we have 44, which is the volume, and then 1993 means the year. Exactly. Good. Questions about this? We'll talk about that in a minute. That is a different part of the question, which is in text citations. So the works cited together and the in-text citations should do a couple of different things. One thing they should do is tell us that you're taking information or ideas from another writer. So that's kind of the basic elementary thing that you need to be able to do in order to not be committing plagiarism. The other thing that it allows you to do is it directs you from the text itself, where you're talking about the author and his or her ideas, to the works cited pages so that I can find the work in question and go consult it myself if I want to follow up with discussion. Yes?
What if it's a website?
Good question, and one that we're going to look at in just a minute. Here's a couple of other things to keep in mind. Sometimes we don't have the author. Sometimes we want to just start off with the web page or article. We'll put that in quotations. We already said the title of publication, the date of publication, and then you want to put the web and the date that you accessed it. We used to have to include the HTML addresses after this, but that's no longer the case. We have a couple of other examples here. For instance, if you're using the MSJC database, you can still have the web page, title of publication, date of publication, but then you have the title of the database that you found it on. So whether it's Nexus Search, EBSCO, or the voice of the shuttle, whatever the database is, you can enter that here. Notice that I've put these in italics. What's another way to underline? That could also have been underlined. Good. So a couple of new rules for the MLA now that we're into the digital era. First of all, for every entry, you must determine the medium of publication. So those will likely be either print, web sources, but it may also be film, CD-ROM, or DVD. As I said before, you're no longer required to provide URLs. And if you're citing an article or a publication that was originally issued in print form, but that you retrieved from an online database, you should type the outline database name, the online database name in italics. So what do these look like now? We started off looking at traditional journals and traditional compilations or anthologies. We have some new formats here. We have, again, our author, the book, the place of publication, the publisher, and the date. And then what's new is we have the medium, print. Similarly, for Talk to Me, down here we have an encyclopedia. This is again, a kind of corporate or collective production, so we don't necessarily know the author of each article, so we would start here with the title of the encyclopedia. Questions? Other formats for citations. This one is the journal again, but in this case, we accessed it on the web instead of the hard copy. There's also a little note here after the volume information that says in page. Anybody want to guess what that is? No? Not paginated. Not paginated. In other words, I would like to tell you the page number, but I can't, because in this new digital era, I'm using a online publication that doesn't have page numbers. So I put in page to indicate that it's not paginated. The example that we looked at a little while ago for a journal had the volume, but it didn't have a point anything. It just had a integer here in the volume slot. This one has a what looks like a decimal after it. That's the number for the volume. So this is the 6th year of publication, but the second number published that year. Okay, and finally we have here an example of a tweet. Here we just have the title of the tweet. SC demonstrated why all the debates are the engines of this campaign. We have the date in the day, month, year format, and then we have the time. And then again, yes, surely you can use tweets. You can use any kind of printed or otherwise circulated information.
But in MLA format, isn't tweets considered like it's not credited?
No, it's credited. It's credited here to Tom Brokaw, and then we have his Twitter name. So we know who the writer is. Okay. There are a lot of variations on this information and lots of other media that you might want to consult. I'm happy, of course, to answer as many questions about this as I can, but sometimes it's easier for you to do some research on your own. So what's your go-to for these kinds of questions? Your go-to is the Purdue Online Writing Lab, or otherwise known as OWL. If you type some of this into your laptop or search bar, this will come up and you'll be able to find a site map and then links to specific questions about MLA formatting and style. Okay, any questions? This is the part where I ask you to show me that you've digested what I've told you here. I've put up here an article, well, actually the table of contents from an edition of a journal, and I want you to come up with a citation for this. The sample citation here has a few errors. See if you can identify them and rewrite them in the correct format. You can refer back to the slides that show how to format an online journal article if you need to. The first error is that the title is underlined. It's an article on an online journal, so quotations are enough to indicate that that's what that is. Secondly, we don't need the editor information. Most journals have editors, but we don't need to include the information about who they are for each entry. Next, the title of the journal isn't presented in the correct way. For online journal articles, we should have the title of the article and it should be underlined or italicized. The formatting for the journal number is also incorrect. We should have the title of the journal and then the volume that the article appears in, followed by the year of publication. Also, we're not told that the article was accessed on the web. And finally, the format of the date isn't correct. The next slide shows the same citation done according to the MLA guidelines. You see here the title of the article is no longer underlined.
The title of the journal is written out and it is underlined, followed by the volume of the journal and the year it was published. We're also told that it's on the web and the date is now correctly formatted.
Okay, now we're going to get into the second part of the presentation, which is what do we do in the text itself when we use information from a citation like this. So there are a few different approaches that we can take to this. One is called paraphrasing, one is called summary, and then one is direct quotation. Whichever one it is, we need to be sure that we are giving credit for ideas that we're taking from other sources. Taking ideas from other sources is an entirely normal part of the composition process. You can't really do research without doing it. So when you're doing research, if you're doing it correctly and drawing on other people's ideas, that means that you're running the risk of committing plagiarism. So you have to be sure that you understand these different skills, paraphrasing, quotation, summary, in order to avoid that and to give proper credit. So, Shanice, if you would read paraphrasing for us.
In a paraphrase, the writer restates practically, in his or her own words, all the relevant information from a passage without offering any additional comments or any suggestion of agreement or disagreement with the source's ideas. Paraphrasing is useful for recording details of the passage when the order of the details is important, but the source's wording is not. It also allows you to avoid quoting too much or at all when the author's choice of words is not worth special attention. Because all the details of a passage are included in a paraphrase, it is often about the same length as the original passage.
Thank you. So we have an example here of paraphrasing. Summary is a kind of brief encapsulation of a larger piece of text. Quotation obviously is word for word. Paraphrasing, we sort of do a little bit of quoting, but then we also kind of restate what we've read. So here in the original passage, Abbas, would you read that for us?
Bruner and the discovery theorists have also eliminated conditions that apparently paved the way for learning. It is significant that these conditions are unique to each learner, so unique in fact that in many cases classrooms can't provide them. Bruner also contends that more one discovers information in a great variety of circumstances, the more likely one is to develop the inner categories required to organize that information. Yet life at school, which is for the most part generic and predictable, daily keeps many children from the great variety of circumstances they need to learn more.
Okay. Anybody want to offer an initial paraphrase here for us? Okay, you don't have to be super thorough here, but just, get some of the main ideas here.
The discovery of theorists have also illuminated conditions that apparently changed or it's kind of hard, but I need to type it out. But such people that had paved the path to learning would be Bruner and some other unique.
Anybody else want to try? Good start there. Let's see what Johan can add to it for us.
Bruner and the discovery theorists who found conditions that apparently paved the way for learning.
Okay.
These conditions are unique to each learner, so unique in fact that in many cases they can't be provided by classrooms. Bruner also says that the more one discovers, the more the student discovers information in different circumstances, the more likely he'll develop the
It's really hard.
sorting system
Yeah.
to organize
But then
information.
the thing is, okay, what I usually do is I copy paste the passage onto a Word document, and then I completely type it out, and I kind of switch the order, and I replace a lot of words. But the problem is that even up till now, even if you switch a couple of words around, that would still be considered plagiarism?
Well, especially if you don't mention the source,
Yeah.
your reference. If you try to do any of those, if you try to paraphrase or summarize without saying anything about the fact that you are getting these ideas from another reference, that's where the problem comes up here. Yeah. But to get back to paraphrasing here, basic idea you both pointed out here is that there are new ways have been discovered to learn, and one of them is having a variety of circumstances in which to learn, and that helps us to learn better. Sometimes school doesn't provide all of that. I think is the concluding idea here. Yes. Sure. Yes.
You know, for paraphrasing a passage, an original one, for
Mhm.
example, after the end of our paraphrase, can we just like reference the source, and would that be enough? Like, to indicate that we did use another idea.
I'm sorry, I didn't quite catch that.
After we paraphrase a paragraph, for example,
Yes.
can we, at the end of the paragraph, can we just like reference the source to indicate that we used someone else's idea?
Well, let's look at an example here. The thing that you want to do is to be sure that you tell us who the author is, so that we can go and find the text in the works cited page. So try to, and plus I don't see any reason to not just go ahead and say educational theorist, Bruner or David Guterson says that, and then go into your paraphrasing. Go ahead and take a little time. Take half a sentence. Take a sentence to set up the introduction of the source that you're going to be discussing. Yes?
If you're getting, if you're paraphrasing or getting a direct sentence or whatever, you have to, let's say, right after that.
Well, you don't have to do it after at all. You can do it beforehand. You can tell us, you can introduce the source that you're about to cite or use.
But like, let's say you put it in quotation.
Okay?
Like,
Uh-huh.
like he said,
Uh-huh.
like, I don't know.
Like, isn't the citations at the end of the essay enough? Do we have to do it in the
Yeah,
essay?
right there.
Like, right after?
No, you must do it in the, that's why I had up here in text citation. There must be something in the body of the text that leads me to the work in the work cited. And tells me definitively, very clearly, that this section of the text relates to this source.
What if it's just like the ideas or the understanding of something?
Yes,
about-
especially the ideas.
Yeah, how do we write them? Like, I mean, the ideas don't actually appear in the writing physically, right?
Sure they do. The idea here is that Bruno and other theorists have discovered other ways for learning, right? There's no way that I would know that if I hadn't done research beforehand. If I hadn't gone into the archives and found this information out. This is not intuitable information.
Okay, Doctor, what we need is that if you write that sentence that you just said, how do you put it in there? Do you have to put it, like, you don't quote it, right? Like,
Well, you
it
could.
after it.
You could.
No, but it's not quotation, it's paraphrase.
Uh-huh.
So what do you do?
Well, actually, this is an example of what to do, because we're actually getting a paraphrase here. So Bruno and the discovery theorist, so if I read this in a text, what would I look for in the works cited?
So then we can, I mean, for example.
Hold on, I want to make sure that this last point is understood.
The work site is understood, but
Yeah.
what we mean is like, do we have to do something with the text to show that from somewhere else?
Well, what's done here?
No, this is the original passage.
No, this is a quote from somebody else. Exactly. Well, that depends, because we've already been told that this is something that has been found out by Bruner. So if we go to the work cited and there's only one work by Bruner, then we're in luck, because it means it's from that work. Yes? And from the citation, if the page numbers are given, we should be able to trace where the idea is from. Now, what's the problem if there are 2 entries by Bruner? Yeah? Then what would I do? No, I would probably put the year. So Bruner, whatever the year was of that publication. So I know that's the one by Bruner that I'm talking about.
Can we number them and like subscript? Have you seen in books?
No,
read books,
that's
and
not MLA style. So you may, but it's not MLA style. Might be the CBE or APA. Sorry? Uh-huh. One more time? Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Or that improve teaching? Uh-huh. Although here the emphasis is on learning. Yeah. Have gave ways? Gives ways. I'm not sure I would say that gives is synonymous with illuminated. What might better go with illuminated? Discovery have discovered conditions, maybe. Enlightened, maybe demonstrated, maybe examined, discussed, clarified. All those would be good. You could say? Yeah. Yeah. This one is a paraphrase that has too many borrowed words and phrases. So you want to be sure that when you're paraphrasing, you are actually doing what you're doing, Najib, and finding different words. So if you're using words that are essentially the same, apparently some conditions which have been illuminated by Bruner and other discovery theorists pave the way for learning or for people to learn, then we're getting too close to having too many borrowed words and actually quoting. Let's just talk a little bit about summarizing, and then we'll conclude for this section of the meeting. Johan, if you would read about summarizing for us. Let me erase this real fast. Okay.
In looking at different theories of learning that discuss individual-based programs such as homeschooling versus the public school system, Gutterson describes the disagreements among cognitivist theorists. One group, the discovery theorists, believes that individual children learn by creating their own ways of sorting the information they take in from their experiences. Schools should help students develop better ways of organizing new material, not just present them with material that is already categorized, as traditional schools do. Assimilationists, theorists, by contrast, believe that children learn by linking what they don't know to information they already know. These theorists claim that traditional schools help students learn, and they present information in ways that allow children to fit the new material into categories they already know.
Okay, thank you. So here we have the discovery theorists again, but in summarizing, we should expect more information to be covered or less information to be covered? More information to be covered. So here we not only have discovery theorists, we also have cognitive theorists, we have assimilationist theorists. We also have something here that shows us the page numbers, exactly. So we would know exactly where in the book to find this information. So 2 things that we looked at today. One is formatting and one is using in-text citations. Okay, so hopefully now you have some more guidelines about how to present the layout of your text, how to lay out the citations themselves, and then how to do in-text citations, which are going to connect for you and your reader the sources that you discuss in your text with the works cited page.